Hey guys, it's Amber, and welcome back to Politics But Make It Fashion. Come interview with me. And today I have a special guest on our show. This is my friend Elaine. We were in the Navy together. We served on the Abraham Lincoln. So both of us are female vets, moms, trying to veterans navigate the whole thing. Kind of the reason that I wanted to talk to her on here today is because both of us served together on the same ship and both of us struggle with similar physical health issues and symptoms. It's like crazy because we're not old, relatively, strapping young, strapping young women. But on the inside, we feel hella old. So today we just wanted to chat about, our Navy life, how it was, what we liked and didn't like, and kind of what life is like now as a veteran, So thank you so much for coming on my show.
For sure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I guess I'll start off with just like, why did you even join the Navy? That age-old question.
So at the time I was 19, living in an apartment that my mom paid for in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and I had absolutely nothing going for me except death. So in an effort to save my life, my mom basically was like,
Hey.
I mean, she was like, I'm done, when your lease is up, no more apartment, no more car, no more cards, no more phone, but you go to the service, you could have a life and you won't die at a young age. And I mean, the idea of dying so young, just I wasn't ready to die. So I agreed. And my mom originally made an appointment with a recruiter with the Air Force, but they didn't show up for our meeting.
Air Force always messing up.
So I was like, gotta go. And my mom was like, we're not done. So she took me around the building to the Navy, the naval recruiting station, walked in and was like, are you guys accepting new applications? And they said, we sure are. And my mom said, great, here's my daughter. I had gold, purple, red hair. I mean, I looked like hot shit. And I mean, that was basically it. I went to boot camp and detoxed heavily from all the alcohol. And I mean,
how did you like boot camp?
So I got asthma.
So asthma is basically so boot camp, say regularly, is 6 weeks long. If you get asthma, that means you like failed something or did something wrong, and then you'll get sent back. So it can go from originally being 6 weeks to like 8 weeks, or people who couldn't swim, 12 weeks, or
you sound like you're speaking from experience.
No, I could swim.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I was done. Okay.
Okay. All right. So I have always struggled with attention, and in boot camp it did not serve me well. Well, I was actually in a 900 division.
Me too.
Because I did have prior ROTC
marching and
yeah.
And so a 900 division in the Navy, you're like a special boot camp unit, and so you either sing at graduation, flag twirling, rifle twirling, and marching. Yep. So I was in 900. I sang. I was in the choir.
Oh. I was.
But you had to know how to do because you'll just
So the marching spots were full, and the only spots left were rifle trolling. And
Yeah.
I didn't know shit about that. And they were not willing to like train you.
Yeah.
So basically they were like, oh, you can't twirl a rifle? Okay, go clean something. I was like, here we go.
Yep.
And yeah, so I was asthmaed back 2 weeks to another division because I just failed to meet their needs. And I mean, those RDCs, I mean, knowing now, I mean, if I knew then what I know now about hazing.
And what the purpose of it was.
I mean, all the shit talking, if I could go back, I'd be like, I need you to just let me do what I do because I'll be fine. Just the way I am.
I was older when I went in, and my parents were in the military, and my brother went through boot camp before me. So I knew that it was just a lot of shit talking. Like, you know, that it wasn't necessarily personal, and I knew that they were going to build you down to build you back up in your image, you know? So like, I already had that in my mind. So I think it allowed me to ignore a lot of just dumb things because I was older too when I went in. So I was thoroughly annoyed normally 100% of the time.
I mean, they took somebody who was already at rock bottom. They took like when I went in there, like the name calling, like the abusive talking, like
that's such a good point. You know what I mean? There's so many people that we went in with who
a normal person
went in for detox, who went in out because they were going to go to jail, or who went in for anything. And you're right, you are taking people kind of at the bottom of the barrel. And I think a lot of people have this idea about people who join the military that it's like the best of the best, and you know, everyone's super patriotic, when a lot of times it's people don't have another choice.
When I was in boot camp, I made damn sure I ate everything I wanted because that was the first time in a long time that I had like 3 hot meals provided to me. And like,
I hated the food. I hated everything. I barely ate. I did not want to have nothing to do with that.
They had cereal.
I was so skinny by the time I got that, just from the running.
My first RDC called me Tubby, and I was like,
ours told us, she was like,
I'll allow it.
Just because you're black doesn't mean they're gonna let you be thick. I was like, oh. I was like, nobody, where'd that come from? Nobody asked you. I cannot stand her. Oh, that woman.
No. Oh my God. One of my RECs, dude, when she used to get mad, she used to get fumbled over her words, which would only piss her off even more. Mate, I'd be like, okay.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry.
They would just be yelling at you, and you just be like,
yeah, but like the thing was, is like, I was like, it wasn't anything new that I hadn't experienced. So I think my indifferent attitude was what pissed them off the most.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, you think you're the first person to fucking yell at me and belittle me? Bitch, let me tell you about my dad. Like, there wasn't anything they could, like, yeah, did it hurt? But there wasn't anything, and there really isn't anything that anybody could really say or do, because I have literally been tortured. I mean, as a child. So, I mean, I was no stranger to
that type of like mental abuse.
Yes. Like somebody trying to mind fuck me.
You're able to just focus and still get through your day because it's, you know,
I was there for a place to live, a job, and survival. Like 3 things that I was really good at at that point in my life. So there wasn't going to be anything standing in my way. Like, even when I went into the Navy, like I had to fill out special requests.
The waivers and stuff.
Because I had so many scars on my body, and like, I mean, so yeah, I don't know. It wasn't the best experience, but I mean, I barely made it. Like, barely made it. I even had somebody come up to me after we were done with battle stations and be like, I just want you to know that you barely made it. And I was like, Okay, well, you see this navy ball cap I got? That's all that fucking matters. So thank you for not saying anything.
Oh
Like,
my
I
gosh.
struggled mentally, like academically, like I was just always all over the place,
Yeah.
never really knowing why. And somehow I was just always getting by. Always getting by. Somebody was like, we can't send her back. I'm not gonna make it.
When you got out and you went through school and stuff, you came to the Lincoln.
Yeah. So I finished, I mean, so I graduated boot camp, went over to A school and was there for a hot minute and then hung out afterwards after school was over.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, was flown out to the ship after you guys had departed Malaysia
Whoop, whoop.
in, that was a good time. What was that, 2010?
Mm-hmm.
You guys had just departed Malaysia and I met up with you guys. I got caught it on the ship. I swear to God, that plane was going down. Yeah. That plane is dangerous. It's not dangerous.
Well, yeah, it looks rickety too.
I mean,
on the inside,
listen,
it's not stable.
No, I mean, it literally sounded like the engines would die. It would be like, and then we would just glide.
Yeah.
And I would just be like, waiting for the engine to start up again. So yeah, met up with you guys right before Bahrain.
So was that almost like your second plane ride then? Or had you been, because that would be scary. Because I know a lot of people's first plane ride was like to boot camp. So if that was like,
oh no.
Okay, good. Because I was like, that would be so scary on that COD for that to be your second plane.
I mean, it was all like a blur. Everything was like boom, 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 boom. Yeah. As soon as they loaded you on the bus, it was like, shut the fuck up. I mean, and the thinking was done. Like, I no longer had to think for myself.
Yeah.
And it was nice.
For me, I just was like, why did I do this every day? Anytime anybody would yell, I'd be like, oh, this was a terrible idea, Amber. This was a terrible idea.
Sometimes you really just have no choice.
Yeah.
And
I knew I had goals.
Yeah.
And I knew that this was the way that I was going to reach them. And for me too, it didn't matter how terrible it was. I was like, it's fine because I know what I want on the other side. And I knew I wanted it way more than I cared about anybody saying whatever to me or anything. So
if somebody was standing in between me, like I wasn't going to let anybody stand in between me and my meal.
Right.
And that has been the motto.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what.
So when you got on the Lincoln and then you went, so Bahrain was the first port visit.
Yes. And I had no social skills. So when I got to the boat, I didn't know how to talk to anybody. Like, I made no efforts to connect with anybody. Like, I mean, that was my first time, like, really being in the world on my own.
Yeah.
Like, without any help from my mom.
Yeah, you need a help, girl.
I did. I was lost.
You were lost.
So somebody signed out with me to go out on Liberty. And by the end of the night, I was being escorted by BM1 Foxy because I didn't know how to get back.
No. It was a journey to get back though. Like,
you had to take a bus, didn't you?
It was a haul.
Yes.
I mean, you had to take, it might have been more than one bus. And then some ports you had to take a bus and then like a ferry and stuff. So yeah. So getting back to the boat was no joke.
That's right. Dude. It was a blessing that he was the oldest looking man that I think I knew. I mean, I thought there were like age requirements, but I think he just maybe grade early.
No, because when I was in boot camp, I was with a girl who was like 35. I think the age they kept lifting because of retention and like the war. They kept lifting the age requirements. So
he like skated.
But I don't know how long he had been in either. Because they would be like he'd been in since Columbus.
Dude.
The people that we had that we served with were a complete disaster. I loved all of them. God.
Dude.
This duo right
all
here.
I think just like we were just a department of people who had a lot of issues. Like if you look at the people, like Girl, come on. Like, listen, we could get into it.
I mean,
but
you know,
I feel like that's what made us work because we were just all a bunch of fucked up people working in a fucked up department, doing some nasty fucked up work, and partying hard when it was time.
Yeah, I mean, worked really hard and partied really hard too.
Painting our arm hair, painting like in our hair.
Yep.
That was about it.
Paint everywhere because it would go through your uniform. So you'd randomly have paint on parts of your body.
That's right. That's right.
Just hands covered in paint. So even though they're clean. They're covered in paint.
That's right.
Paint probably had lead in it. I mean,
our problems are not from the Navy, right? Like
Oh,
let's talk about Bahrain for a moment. Oh, God. And you know, the United Emirates and the burn pits. and how that we're, you know, kind of believing just because again, we're literally across the states from each other and how that correlates to the fact that there's obviously a bacteria somewhere and the doctors are like, it's not H. pylori, I just don't know.
Yeah. That's so one day, one of the new things that passed last year, or maybe like 18 months ago, something like that, was the PACT Act. And basically that gave a lot of veterans a preemptive if you were anywhere near areas that had burn pits, that you probably were likely to suffer from some type of disease and be very unhealthy and probably die early. I had the pleasure of being on a roundtable with Senator Bob Casey before the bill was passed to really help pass the bill and just talk about being a veteran and talk about being a female veteran. And there was a commander there who was on a roundtable with us, and he was talking about how when he got back after doing like 2 tours, how many people in his unit died after that from like cancers, like stomach cancers, brain cancers. And these were people who were our age, young people, you know, who went in, you know, did 2 tours and managed to come back and then got super sick, you know,
on top of everything else.
Right. And it took a while for people, the VA, to kind of acknowledge like what happened and everything. So the bill is good, but I don't think it really goes far enough, because then we're in this gray area because we were on a ship. So we were within burn pit areas a lot of the time, just because a lot of our ships were not that far off the coast.
Yeah.
You know, you're under sometimes 100 miles. So, you know, you can see smoke cloud, you can see it move over areas and stuff. But I don't know if you guys know this about Vietnam, but I learned this from my best friend's dad, may he rest in peace. But he was saying how when Agent Orange was a thing, they tried to discount the Navy in it because they said the Navy wasn't on the ground. So what they realized was happening is that the potable water from the ship, you suck in the water from the whatever you're in. So the Navy that was going up the rivers in the Vietnam jungle, they weren't on the ground, but they were on boats. They're sucking in the water. Agent Orange is falling and landing on the water, in the water, whatever. And so now it's being contaminated. So that's how they were being contaminated. So I don't know all the science or whatever, but I mean, same thing, right? Could, you know, similar thing could be happening. And then all the jet fuel in the water.
Yeah. I mean, and based on what I was reading, not only did it expand, you know, vertically up in the air, but that it did expand over the ocean.
Yeah.
I mean, that was our AOR for years. I mean, for 2 years, we essentially sailed in boxes in their ocean. So
that's true. We did. Yeah.
I mean, and again, what makes it significant is because we are the next generation that was exposed to Agent Orange. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know what a burn pit is and what it consists of, I mean, bodies,
batteries,
hazmat, I mean,
ammunition, anything that you're not tires using that's being discarded would be put in there. Poop.
Yep. I mean, I mean, they tested the burn pits, the ones that they've added to the list, and found all of those things. And one of the things that was like, so asbestos, I read about that, like,
oh, and our ship had a lot of asbestos on it.
But
Yeah.
for anyone on the boat who's exposed, like it takes essentially like 30 plus years.
Yeah, for it to.
But Agent Orange and things like that, 10 plus
Yep.
years.
Yeah.
And when did you hit your 10-year mark?
Um,
Like from when you first,
when I first got in a couple years ago. Yeah.
and then when did you start getting sick?
I got sick probably a couple years after I got out, but I was in for 8.
Well,
So
yeah.
so I was right there then.
Yeah. How many more deployments did you do, right?
Yeah. I did another one after you. Right. Actually, when you were kind of getting out, when you were sick with your daughter, I was on another deployment. We pretty much went right back in. So yeah, so she got out before I did. And one of the reasons she got out was because she had a horrific experience trying to bring a child into this world. She had the displeasure of giving birth at a naval hospital and having military doctors and things like that. And I mean, pretty much almost died. Like they almost killed her. And honestly, I think one of the reasons that me and my child are still here, because my pregnancy was horrific, we almost died multiple times, is because of you. I did not go to a naval hospital. I fought it because I was like, no, you can't.
I don't want to die.
I don't want to die. And that was kind of at the beginning, but that was one of the reasons. And then I had so many health problems. And I was just telling you, I almost miscarried at 7 weeks initially and stuff. So I was so happy that I had like good doctors, because she told me that one of the people was like, oh, you're our first pregnant person we've had here in our like ICU, or
I was the first pregnant woman in the ICU at the Naval Medical Center in Portsmouth.
That's not what you want to hear, though. Like, that's not what you want to hear when you're,
I didn't find out about this till after. Like, doctors were like coming to meet me because they legitimately had no idea how I was alive.
Yeah.
I mean, the mortality rate of somebody with severe sepsis is like 5 to 15%.
Yeah.
And I was septic from Tuesday to Friday. So the fact,
and this was while she was pregnant.
I had just hit 8 months pregnant that week.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was and is a recurring nightmare that I remember intimately, like from the orientation of the room where I was sitting, where the nurses, the students, like I was dying, and there were still students practicing on me. There were students monitoring me when I was sleeping. Like,
and you can hear that. Like, you can.
Well, I knew because I was told when I very first got there, because initially when I got into the hospital, they wanted me to give a urine sample. And because whatever they detected in my urine was what it was, they wanted to come get a fresh sample. And there were multiple young females there who, while awake, were trying to give me a pediatric catheter to get a fresh urine sample.
Yeah, no.
And they couldn't do it. They were failing over and over and over, and I was screaming. I was like, what the fuck did I do to deserve this? Like, and then finally a doctor came in after Clement left the room. Like, I looked over at her and I was just like,
yeah, that was another person that we served with who was there. Yeah.
She drove me to the hospital. She came, I called her up and was like, my fever is over 103. Like, I need you to come pick me up. Yeah. And she came and got me because she, had fallen off that bull. So she was limb due at the time. So she was available. She was at home.
Oh my gosh.
So she came to get me and drove me to the hospital. And so I looked over at her and was like pleading, like, what the fuck? Like, what is happening? Like, please help me. And she left the room and I could see her talking to some female doctor. And she came in and was like, get the fuck back. And she ended up doing it herself.
Yeah.
And then right after that was like, you know, your fever's too high. We need to cut your abscess back open. We can't give you any local anesthetic because your fever's going to burn it off.
Yeah, really fast. And
so they took the gauze out of my abscess that was in my leg that had ruptured. So I was severely septic at that moment. Yeah. And she was pulling the gauze out and started, you know, had to cut it back open again. And I must have passed out at that point because I don't remember very much. Like that night became a blur. Like I went into the hospital wearing my Division 255 shirt, and I woke up to them cutting my clothes off of me and putting ice packs all over my body. And then, but like the next day, like Clement had to go check back in with her command. Like they knew she was there and they let her stay with me.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Yeah. And she brought me back some Hardee's that was like down the street from the hospital.
Those
some
fries.
Chicken stars. And like, I know that like this sounds silly, but like I even got up to go pee.
Yeah.
Sometime on that Wednesday. And then like by Wednesday afternoon, I guess I was on 100% oxygen in labor and delivery, and my oxygen levels were still declining. So that day they sent an ICU doctor up to see me and was just asking me questions like, are you too tired to stay awake?
Yeah.
And at the time I didn't know this, but it was like in the middle of the afternoon. So, you know, I'm like, I'm exhausted. All I want to do is go to sleep. Like I can't keep my eyes open. And it was like with those responses that they moved me to the ICU immediately. And, you know, I met my nurse who ended up being one of my tattoo artists,
which is so cool.
Mom who worked at the Naval Hospital, and she was like asking me about my tattoos and asking me where I got them from, and I was like, oh, Por Vida Tattoo in Albuquerque, and she's like, oh my god, my son Alex works there, and I was like, Alex Atencio? And she goes, yeah, and I'm like, no way, like I was like besties with your daughter at one point, like, you know, knew your son from school, like he did the one on my thigh and like some flowers on my arm, and it was just such a small world.
Yeah.
And she ended up being with me the whole time. And Wednesday, you know, it just again was being monitored, but I actually got to feel contractions when they moved me down to the ICU because of just all the stress, my temperature, I mean everything. We didn't know it, but like my left lung was failing. And but they stopped those. But that was that's the one and only time I ever got to feel contractions with Andrea. Other than like my Braxton hip, but you know. But anyway, you know, I'm, you know, talking with her and like seemingly like doing better.
Right.
And then that night I went to bed, and at the time I was wearing just like a overall like oxygen mask. And Thursday morning around like 4 a.m. I woke up and sat up in bed and took off my mask, and I just kept saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And there was a young you know, Asian woman sitting there, and she was there to monitor Andrea. And I'm like, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And she's like, what do you want me to do?
I don't know.
I said, help me. I can't breathe. I mean, I'm like freaking out, and my oxygen levels are continuing to drop. My left lung had collapsed. I had developed a blood clot in my left lung, and it was
better them to catch that. You know,
afterwards.
After, right.
So doctors came.
This is like driving me nuts. So like I can see the. I don't know. Like just
So like doctors came running into my room, and Alex's mom, I don't remember her name, but she ran over to the monitor and she's like, calling out my oxygen levels,
Mhm.
and they're just screaming at me, put your mask back on, put your mask back on. And I'm like shoving it in my mouth. Like I'm trying to eat my mask.
Yeah.
Like I'm like trying to inhale the air, and I'm like, there's nothing coming out. It's
Yeah.
broken. It's broken. And obviously I'm like much more.
You're dying.
Yeah.
So that's why. Yeah.
And I'm just like, it's not working. It's not working. And I don't know the name of the oxygen mask, but it's similar to like the SCBA masks that we use on the ship, the ones that like shoot out oxygen. So they tried giving me one of those, but I couldn't catch my breath. Like they had it turned down as low as it could go, and I would put it up to my mouth and try to take a breath.
You're almost like choking.
Yeah.
On
yeah. And so you know, after several tries, you know, they're yelling at me, and I'm continuing to shout at them, it's not working, it's not working. And I eventually just sat back in my bed, and I put the mask down, and I just kept saying, it's okay. It's okay. I'm okay. Like,
yeah,
I
feel like that. There was one time where I said those exact words, and I was like, because I was dying. And I was like, I was like, Mom, it's gonna be okay. It's okay.
There was an overwhelming sense of peacefulness.
Yeah.
In those, like suddenly,
I want to ask you a question. You don't have to answer this, but maybe you can ponder it though. When you feel those moments like that, do you feel like that makes you more prone to think about ending your life because you know that moment of peace?
I think about death a lot. Like, I mean, it's a really ugly topic to talk about, but
like, I wonder if like sometimes I wonder if I'm chasing that.
I've brought that up with my therapist many times because in like there wasn't like when I think subconsciously like I had accepted what was happening.
Like
and there wasn't any more pain. My oxygen levels had, I mean, they had dropped down significantly enough to where I heard Alex's mom shout that my lips were turning blue.
Yeah.
And then they kicked my bed back, and a doctor appeared over my face and was just hand pumping oxygen into me until the intubation and anesthesiologist team came. It took them 45 minutes.
Were you swollen?
I have no idea. I mean, I had compression socks on.
Yeah.
I mean, but I later found out that it took 45 minutes for them to arrive. So for
them to arrive, I thought you meant just to get the
everything. Like until I was put.
Time.
Yeah.
Like that's
wild. Mm-hmm. You know, so they put me in like a medical induced coma because my livers were failing, my kidneys were failing, and then I lost function of my left lung. And then my heart started, you know, kind of skipping some beats. And so I had like a catheter put in my neck to my heart to keep it pumping.
Yeah.
And by Friday morning, they pulled my mom into a conference room and said, your daughter isn't going to make it to tomorrow morning. So we need to take the baby out or they're both going to die.
Yeah.
And so they took me to labor delivery, you know, fully expecting that
you weren't going to come back.
I wasn't going to come back. And yeah, after they took Andrea out, she had to be resuscitated and she had 2 blood transfusions. And I didn't meet her until she was already 3 days old. I didn't even know that I had her until they like started waking me up. And there was a doctor in my room talking about how like babies born prematurely can have
long-term
you know, developmental disabilities and I like looked at my mom. I was still intubated, so I like signed to her like, whose baby are they talking about? And that's when they told me that they had taken her out. But I mean, after they took her out, they took me back to the ICU like not knowing like
what was gonna happen.
yeah. And I guess I don't know how much longer after, but I produced like my first bag of urine in like days. And they were like, yeah, well, so they needed to take her out because I guess there are like 4 stages of kidney failure, and I was stage 3.
Yeah.
So they were already like assuming that I was going to need to be put on dialysis immediately after they took Andrea out, but then I started peeing.
Yeah.
So
guys, you would think with all of this that she would be like 100% disabled vet, right? Like no worries.
I got 10%
ready to be taken care of. Oh, what was that?
I got 10% disability from that. And you know what it was from? My cesarean scar. What? Yes. So like all the therapy I've been getting over the years, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars worth of therapy. And little did I know, I could have gone back to the VA like, bitch, you almost killed me.
Yeah.
My mental status is like hanging on, you know, but I was on so many meds and they just kept me going. Like I was a single mom. Like all I knew was how to survive.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did. Like after I was done, like I was out of work for like 3 months.
Yeah. Because you weren't really in the place. So you ended up getting out.
Yeah.
After you had your daughter and stuff like that. But even still, so even if I'm thinking a year out, say from that experience, but I know it wasn't even that long, but like I don't even feel like I would be in a headspace to comprehend like what I would need to say, what I would need to do, like knowing I would need to like get disability, even be able to cognitively like be able to be like, oh, this is going to cause long-term issues for me and my kid. Like you're not in that place. That's so far from your brain. So you're doing a bunch of stuff, signing papers,
dude,
you know.
My command did not even know. Like by the time my command knew I was in the hospital, I was already in a coma. Like I was, so when I became pregnant, they put me on shore duty. I was originally stationed at the security office on base, and they treated me like I was bottom of the barrel scum.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how I found out about the air terminal, or I don't know if they sent me TDY there or whatever. But by the grace of the universe, I was sent over to the air station, and somebody at the air station Facebook messaged my mom, like, hey, we haven't heard from your daughter. She was supposed to be SIQ after her abscess, draining, but we haven't heard from her.
Nobody went to like go.
So by the time they found out, my chief, who was at the air station, she not only showed up, but she stayed with my mom. She convinced my mom to leave my bedside to go to the Fisher house to like go check in.
Yeah.
I mean, they gave my mom
to shower
fucking, and like, I mean, they gave my mom everything.
Yeah.
We got the biggest room, like we were catered. My mom was catered to. But my chief, she came and she was with my mom the whole fucking time, went home, put on civilian clothes, came back, stayed with my mom. Like nobody talked to my mom, like without the chief there. Like she was like, what do you need? Like, what is this about? And then the chief at like the security station, like finally showed up. And I guess like my mom, the chief who was there was basically like, you're not needed. You can go. And was essentially like dismissed in a room in front of a room full of people just because like
why are you here now?
Yeah.
Where have you been?
Yeah. Like I was like the forgotten child.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, she was my mom's rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're gonna take a break and we will be right back.